Does the term art through adversity ring a bell? The classic example in Hollywood is the film Jaws. Steven Spielberg was having a heck of a time getting his animatronic shark to work. The shark was supposed to have a lot more screen time in the film, but because the contraption was giving him major agita, Steven Spielberg ended up having to improvise. So instead of making a forgettable, schlocky summer film for teens, the absence of the shark on screen enhanced the material and created a layered, psychologically terrifying story. What then would you say is the opposite of art through adversity? I thought about this a lot, and I'll leave you all in the comments to come up with your best take about what to call it. You can wordsmith away. But I believe I have identified the living embodiment of this notion in the person of Alec Baldwin. Alec has always had pretensions of being something bigger than he is. He said many times in the past that he wanted to be a politician and or a lawyer, but fell into acting. He also takes on airs of being a man of highbrow tastes, like the theater, the opera, a man of letters, if you will. Is this projection, or is Alec compensating because he knows that he is altogether mediocre? Alec can look around him at the cast of lunatics in his immediate family and see that he is from a lower sort of stock. His father and namesake was a death of a salesman, Willie Loman type, not unlike Jack Lemmon's character in Glengarry Glen Ross, who Alec shared memorable scenes with in the film. Alec's father, Alexander Ray Baldwin II, like Alec, aspired to a higher station in life. Instead, Alec's dad was a high school teacher and coach. I have no doubt that this figures greatly in the Baldwin family psychodrama. Alec must also resent his goofy brothers who followed him into Hollywood. All of the Baldwin brothers, as young men, had undeniably photogenic features, and the cameras loved them then. They all have fairly limited range on screen, I think, but they do project a passable enough facsimile of menace and danger. It's enough to clear the average moviegoer's suspension of disbelief anyway. And the Baldwin brothers were all gifted with that wonderful gravelly timbre in their speaking voices. I actually think Alec's voice is his best quality as a performer, and they all have that dose of glib charm that can sometimes translate on film. They have enough of a sparkle of seduction in their eyes that the studio actually tried Alec as a leading man in rom-coms, but then Disney and the movie-going public found that the Baldwin charm doesn't run that deep. His lack of likability resulted in some box office poison so lethal that there's no one still alive who saw The Marrying Man in its original theatrical run. You gotta check that one out, folks. It's where Alec and Kim met.
Meet Charlie Pearl. He had it all. Money.
I'm very good at inheriting money. I may be the best in my field.
Charm.
Oh, Charlie.
And the daughter of the most powerful man in Hollywood, Adele Horner.
I've been out with every starlet from Paramount to Warner Brothers, but that was before I met Adele.
Is it having $30 million that makes you so cocky?
Alec probably thinks of himself on some level as a serious thespian. Compared to his brothers, Alec graduated from NYU Drama School and had to pay his dues in the theater and on soap operas. But then again, Billy and Stephen Baldwin are strong data points weighing against Alec's talents as an actor, if you'll stick with me here for a second. I actually prefer either of the younger Baldwin brothers over Alec on screen. Overall, Alec has barely registered for me in anything I've ever seen him in. The one thing that I thought Alec was great in was as the narrator in The Royal Tenenbaums, which in my opinion was the high watermark of Wes Anderson's directorial career. It's all been pretty much downhill from there. Alec's part in Tenenbaums is actually a great metaphor for his career as an actor. Baldwin was, as the narrator, was a disembodied voice, a Greek chorus of one who did not represent a point of view or a character in the events of the film. Stephen and Billy are much more natural and loose on screen in my view. And everyone at this point likes to say, hey, what about Alec's role in Glengarry Glen Ross? Alec was great in that flick though, right? No, David Mamet's dialogue was great. Alec was gifted a Pantheon-level monologue in his role, but his lousy, off-key attempt at a Boston accent is the drizzling shits. It's the cinematic version of Alec evacuating his bowels in his pants. Alec sucks out loud in the movie, and if you feel like debating me, pull up any clip of him in Glengarry Glen Ross, and you will not be able to unhear his accent. It's even worse that Alec is playing opposite in scenes to so many other legends of the silver screen, where he's simultaneously trammeling around his trail of shit with his Gucci loafers. I say all of this to emphasize that Alec Baldwin is the platonic ideal case study of the inverse of art through adversity. Alec is a hollow man, a straw man. He's been materially successful based on his innate characteristics and luck, and in that way he's like a character straight out of a Greek tragedy, as he has no way to find fulfillment. Sort of like a King Midas figure where everything he touches turns to gold, but the monkey's paw is that this prevents him from eating or drinking or being close to his family for fear of turning all of these things inanimate. Alec compensates by exploding into rages and with his pretensions as someone more high-minded than he really is. On social media and in the press, he poses as a lover of the most stereotypical boomer highbrow interests. But really, he's disinterested beyond putting in the basic effort to outwardly appear to be some sort of cultured man of taste. Alec is a standard issue asshole from Massapequa, Long Island. At best, he's a dilettante. As he enters into his declining years, the malaise of his situation has to be oppressive. Can you imagine being married to Hilaria?
No, I think we're gonna see. We're gonna see how it feels to have it be out there.
It's gonna be great. You're a winner.
Oh my God! When I'm talking, you're not talking.
Sorry.
No, when I'm talking, you're not talking.
Alec is not a serious guy. Hilaria is not a serious anything. These people have no real-world skills, and their careers are now smoking craters in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. The only move left to them is the one that makes perfect sense in Baldwin world, which is pimp out the kids on reality television and hope one or more of their 7 Baldwinitos can make the same deal Alec's niece Haley did with El Diablo Los Hollywood. Just making sure that Hilaria is going to be able to pick up what I put down here. In the months after the Rush shooting in the fall of 2021, when Alec Baldwin killed cinematographer Helena Hutchins and gravely wounded director Joel Souza, I became riveted by the unfolding tragedy. And about a year before that, in the doldrums of the first pandemic winter, I began feeling something like an emotional investment in the Baldwin soap opera when Hilaria's fake Spanish identity was unveiled to the world. The phenomenon of griftsmiths, which is the nickname for Hilaria/Hillary's fake persona saga, seemed like a low-stakes distraction from a very grim moment in the world. It may have signaled something more meaningful to come, though. Did the dam burst on the power elite's orderly control of the media narrative in late December 2020? In retrospect, it may have been a massive watershed event and a total fluke. In our current age of inanities, where the minutia is all that remains, it was a typically banal social media slap fight that kicked off the Baldwin chain reaction. Hillary Hayward Thomas's true identity and her Spanish grift became widely known because her PR gatekeepers were on Christmas break. Amy Schumer, of all people, goofed on Hillary. Hillary then tried to cry bully Amy in return, accusing Amy of thin-shaming her. This momentum shook loose an all-time Twitter moment when a PR professional going by the handle Lenny Briscoe said what needed to be said at the perfect moment and in the perfect tone.
It's still real to me, damn it! I mean, thank you.
Easy, man.
Thank y'all guys. Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Funk, for saying what needed to be said.
By the time Hillary's team got back in the office, the Hilaria dumpster fire had been turbocharged with thermite-level reputational damage. The Baldwin brand appeal was now a gurgling hole in the earth. And the fire still burns, fueled by pockets of molten rocks and metal. Since the end of 2020, we've seen the gatekeepers slowly losing their death grip on the narrative. In ways great and small, people have become more and more aware that the media are not to be trusted, and the PR playbook they've been using has been disenchanted like a worn-out magic wand. Now we want to see the JFK files for ourselves. Now we investigate the underlying premise of a Hollywood feud. Somewhere, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are still processing their shell shock that their foolproof PR offensive was defenestrated like Custer at Little Bighorn. We see past the veil when the media tells us that our leaders are still sharp as a row of alligator teeth, when our eyes and ears tell us that we live in a gerontocracy. The collective fingers on the nuclear button are now connected to cotton candy brains racked with age-related decline. Or the apparent gerontocracy is layer one of the onion. Nothing tracks. Nothing makes sense anymore. Nothing ever did. And the Baldwins are lodged in the intersection of a lot of these nothings, and I cannot force myself to care or follow the Baldwin saga anymore. I feel only apathy. The last few years have forcibly beat any interest in the Baldwin saga out of me. I can't bring myself to care about the reality show on TLC. The actual reality I have glimpsed in researching the Baldwins for a series I wrote on Substack was more than enough for me, and I am officially out of the Baldwin business. And I feel this even more acutely now that the same media elite are once again trying to prop up the Baldwin brand on a TLC reality show. The attempt to wring the last drops of blood from Alec and Hilaria is darkly cynical, even for reality show producers. Alec and Hilaria stand out as shameless and self-obsessed even in Hollywood. Anywhere you set them down, Alec and Hillary are outliers on a cosmic scale. They are so far from the collective unconsciousness of the rest of humanity that they've achieved escape velocity from this solar system and have blown out into the weightless infinity at ludicrous speed. Fuck plaid, they've gone Argyle.
What the hell was that? Spaceball 1. They've gone to plaid.
This video is my catharsis. Along the way, I came to some conclusions. I'd like to discuss why I think the best option is to ignore the Baldwin train wreck. Alec and Hilaria Baldwin are obviously incapable of self-reflection or being actual human beings. And I'm afraid they are resorting to a darker path to try and maintain their A-list lifestyle. Alec Baldwin's most well-known trait as a longtime celebrity is his smoldering temper. The accidental shooting incident on the set of Rust then couldn't help but be colored by our knowledge of Alec's personality. Then there were the other compartments of the Baldwin lore that created an outward impression for the public that Alec Baldwin had a lot on his plate. We've all witnessed Alec age in dog years since the Rust shooting. The family dynamics are also littered with minefields of unspeakably crazy people and situations. Alec's late life brood of children, his utterly bizarre fake Spanish wife, and his famous acting family full of public figures of lesser renown than Alec, all of these elements were layered on the inciting tragedy, like matryoshka dolls, and each sphere of Alec's relationships in the internal family dynamic is imbued with that same fatal Baldwin flaw of crazy anger, or, in Hilaria's case, just fuck-faced crazy. I did a series of deep dives into the pockets of the Baldwin madness that I found particularly compelling. I spent weeks digging through archives of magazines and newspapers to compile a massive timeline, the Alec Baldwin Terror Timeline, I titled it. I'll put links to the old Substack articles in case you guys want to burn a few hours, of all of Alec's public controversies. I spent many more weeks sifting through the bowels of the internet to write a massive novella-length account of the Hilaria Baldwin moon bump conspiracy. Many people online had concluded that Hilaria faked most of her pregnancies and used surrogates. And at the time, I felt a gnawing hunger to understand. By the time the Rust trial rolled around last year, I was mostly sick of the Baldwins. I wrote a couple of shorter items on the trial and made some YouTube videos based on my prior material. And I wrote one new piece that summed up my feelings at that point by describing the parallels I had noticed between Alec Baldwin's descent into tragedy and the John Steinbeck classic, The Winter of Our Discontent. Somewhere along the way, I ended up being a moderator on the Hilaria Baldwin subreddit for a couple of years there. The reality show and the continued slide into the netherworld of tabloid-only relevance had taken a toll on me, as this seemed a fate worse than death for the Baldwin clan. Billy and Stephen Baldwin had long since been banished to the paparazzi underworld, and Alec is now inarguably there too, as Alec is now a fixture on the convention circuit, signing autographs, taking photos, and can only book film roles in geezer teaser, streamer schlock, or fifth-rate foreign films. What really has made me turn away from the years-long Baldwin billion-car pileup, though, is Alec and Hilaria's children being commercialized. The only thing I can conclude with the kids being marketed in the reality show is that Alec and Hilaria, or more likely their agents and managers and PR people, if any of those exist, have accepted that Alec will never be back on another network TV show like 30 Rock, and Hilaria will never be handed brand deals as an influencer like she was when the grift was still good. The only possible way back to those showbiz paychecks is through the children. As is tradition in Hollywood and the Baldwin family, the retirement plan is to turn into an unholy set of momager and dadager in the hopes that one of the Baldwinitos can pan out like Haley did for Stephen Baldwin, Haley Bieber, that is. Seeing the impending cycle of the Baldwin children being fed into the Hollywood meat grinder has felt like a months-long night terror. It's the dream where you show up to a test unprepared, not wearing pants. The dream where you're being chased through the streets of a film noir and you can't shake your tail. The falling dream where you are flailing into a blackness. Or maybe a Twilight Zone scenario where you need to get a message to the pilot, but everyone on the plane thinks you're crazy because you're Bill Shatner and you can't stop putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. I can see the path that the train wreck will take so clearly in my mind, but I am helpless to alter the course. And if along the way, one of the kids can stalk and bag an even bigger star, some ineffable Justin Bieber of the future, well, all the better. Then it won't matter that Alec and Hilaria spent untold millions to extricate themselves from the Rust disaster, and Hilaria can keep pretending to be Spanish. And one day she might even decide to dick around with one of those language apps, Duolingo or Rosetta Stone or Find Choices I hear, and actually learn her native tongue. One of the inspirations for me to make a record of my time in the Baldwin verse was Joan Didion's 1967 essay, Goodbye to All That, about moving out of New York City after becoming disenchanted living there as a young writer. Something must have been buried in my subconscious mind, a long-forgotten association, because I came across a passage in revisiting the White Album essays by Joan Didion that made my Baldwin malaise make sense. My intuitions connected with my conscious mind, as if I had been attempting to lockpick a bank vault. The pins all fell in the tumbler wheel rolling around in my mind, and the door sprung open. I've been, of course, revisiting a lot of Didion as a consequence of being inspired by her, and I'm often listening to audio versions of her material in the background of my days as well. And towards the end of the process of pulling everything together for this video, I came across some old notes of mine in a Google document. The notes were on potential projects involving the Baldwin universe. In my excavations, I'd come to realize how there were so many different layers of the story of Alec and Hilaria, and most of them have remained hidden or unexplored generally in the media. The immediate family of Alec, for example, includes, like I mentioned before, Haley and Justin Bieber, but also Billy Baldwin and his wife, China Phillips. Haley and Justin's saga, the little bit that I've explored before noping out of it, is beyond weird, but I understand it for the most part, or at least I think I do. I feel like I cannot begin to grasp the insanity of Billy Baldwin and China Phillips. And I'm generally more familiar with them than Justin and Haley, because I'm a fan of 60s pop and the Laurel Canyon scene, and China's parents, if you don't know, John and Michelle Phillips, were a huge part of this world as members of the Mamas and the Papas. I've also been a Scientology watcher for some years, so I learned about that end of the family because Danny Masterson was married to Bijou Phillips, China's half-sister. It wasn't until deep into this process that I came across this passage in that audio version of Joan Didion's The White Album essay, which gave me some small shred of perspective on how dark and weird the extended family of the Baldwins really was. My intuition was telling me to leave this foul place for a reason.
Spending time with music people was confusing and required a more fluid and ultimately a more passive approach than I ever acquired. In the first place, time was never of the essence. We would have dinner at 9, unless we had it at 11:30, or we could order in late. We would go down to USC to see the Living Theatre if the limo came at the very moment when no one had just made a drink or a cigarette or an arrangement to meet Ultraviolet at the Montecito. In any case, David Hockney was coming by. In any case, Ultraviolet was not at the Montecito. In any case, we would go down to USC and see the Living Theatre tonight, or we would see the Living Theatre another night, in New York or Prague. First, we wanted sushi for 20, steamed clams, vegetable vindaloo, and many rum drinks with gardenias for our hair. First, we wanted a table for 12, 14 at the most, although there might be 6 more, or 8 more, or 11 more. There would never be 1 or 2 more, because music people did not travel in groups of 1 or 2. John and Michelle Phillips, on their way to the hospital for the birth of their daughter China, had the limo detour into Hollywood in order to pick up a friend, Anne Marshall. This incident, which I often embroider in my mind to include an imaginary second detour to the luau for gardenias, exactly describes the music business to me.
I hope this all explains to you why I have sworn off following anything to do with the Baldwins. It is too bleak, and I've felt a black dread when anything Baldwin comes to mind for some many months. I thought about doing another deep dive, but there's only darkness in the orbit of the cursed Baldwin name. On one side, the melodrama of Haley and Justin Bieber, which seems to me like some emblem of end-stage celebrity culture. On the other side, through Billy Baldwin's marriage to China Phillips, herself obviously a product of dizzying dysfunction, the Masterson family hovers like a cloud of soot. Danny Masterson, the erstwhile brother-in-law to Billy through Danny's now severed marriage to Bijou, half-sister of China, rots in a California prison. Danny Masterson does, serving 20 to life on 2 counts of forcible rape. And Billy in China actually attended a lot of the trial of Danny Masterson, so it's one reason why it was so on Front Street, that relationship, to me. China and Danny Masterson's now ex-wife Bijou are both the daughters of John Phillips. They have different mothers. The front man of the Mamas and the Papas. And John Phillips, if you don't know your rock and roll history, was one of the most notoriously debauched music industry figures in the 60s, which is fucking saying something, because everyone in the 60s scene was blasted on drugs, but Phillips became so strung out, he started being a trafficker of not only street drugs, but pharmaceutical-grade narcotics. And he had a number of infamous fallings out and fallings in with his bandmates and all sorts of other people, including a very bizarre saga where he fired at his at-the-time wife, Michelle, from the Mamas and the Papas for having an affair, and then later rehired her. And was also accused, of course, by his other daughter, Mackenzie Phillips, of incest. Famously, she went on Oprah in, I think, 2009 to relay that story. The threat of fate did not ignore Alec and Billy in Stephen's own family line. Their father was the victim of an accidental shooting in the military. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar. Alexander Ray Baldwin II, Alec, Billy, and Stephen's dad, was shot through the gut by another soldier who was handling his firearm carelessly. Alec's dad then needed to support his growing family after getting discharged from the military, and so circumstances forced him into a career as a school teacher. He had higher aspirations like Alec did as well, being perhaps a lawyer or a politician. Alec's father's turn of bad luck lasted nearly 30 years working at that school before he died at 55 years old. He was done in by a galloping lung cancer, and Alec has said online in remembrances of his father that the family thinks that the lung cancer was possibly catalyzed from Alec Sr. working on unventilated rifle ranges as a shooting coach. Everywhere you turn in this family, every rock you flip over, you only find more and more colonies of crazy shit. I hope beyond hope that my worries are unfounded and the kids will be all right. Either way, I don't want to feed into the narcissistic supply of this family anymore. The best way to move forward, I think, is to ignore the hoopla and the car crash vibes and seek out some new horizons.